Hi everybody, welcome to today's meeting. I'm Mandy and I'm your facilitator for today's session. Just before we hand over to the lovely Laura, just to let you know the session is being recorded and a link will be provided on the website after the event, so you can go back and look at it again, or if there's people who have missed it, you can pass that information on to them. We are going to do questions, so we do encourage you to interact with us. There's a chat facility, so you can pop your questions in there, and we're going to do them at the end. Or if you're happy to be on camera at the end, you can unmute your mic and ask your question that way as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today. I am going to be talking to you all about how to support your sleep during the menopause. Now, I've also been given hosting rights, which is great, but it means I'm admitting some people at the same time. So I'm really sorry if I feel a tiny bit distracted at the minute, because I'm trying to let people in at the same time. So let me tell you a little bit about me. First of all, I am a nutritional therapist. So what that means is I support people with their health who have got all sorts of health conditions and are trying to get better. And I use food and supplementation to try and support their health. I also do lots and lots of talks all about hormones, menopause, perimenopause, healthy eating. And I work for a gynecology company who are based, I'm based in London and they're based in London. And I am a mum of 3 boys who are aged between 5 and 13, and I'm in that kind of early perimenopause stage. So I'm kind of experiencing some symptoms, but not all of them yet. But I feel quite like I support a lot of women with perimenopause and menopause. So it's that kind of stage of life that I'm in. So what I want to talk to you about is a little bit about what's going on in our bodies when we're talking about menopause and perimenopause, and then about sleep. And it's going to be quite a lot about how they're both linked and how they're both, you know, it's this chicken and egg thing. They both interact with each other. We're going to talk quite a lot about how to support your sleep through food and then lifestyle factors as well. There is going to be quite a lot of information, quite a lot of tips and things. And what I don't want you to do is come away feeling overwhelmed, because, you know, there's always a lot of information and there's always a lot of stuff, you know, we could be improving on, but it's the idea that you are just able to take some of these tips away that might be really helpful for you to support your perimenopause, menopause symptoms, and also to support your sleep. So I know probably, you know, you're having quite a lot of talks at the moment, which is brilliant, about menopause. So you might be quite experienced in knowing what it's all about. But just for those who are, you know, slightly confused or new to it, what is the difference between menopause and perimenopause? So these are words that are bandied about a lot, but menopause simply is like an anniversary of when our periods have stopped. It's 12 months when you haven't had a period from the last one. So it's literally a day. Perimenopause is that time in the lead up. For some women, it's a couple of years before menopause. For some women, it can go on symptoms, you know, 10, 15 years even before. And often what we do to support our body before menopause and support our sleep can be really, really helpful in minimizing menopause symptoms. In that perimenopause stage, our ovaries are slowly declining in function. And that means that we're having overall less estrogen, overall less progesterone, but there are fluctuations. So there will be times when actually your estrogen is quite high in relation to your progesterone. And those kind of surges and those imbalances in our body are what causes symptoms. When we're post-menopause, generally our body settles a bit. It can still take a few years for that kind of settling to occur. But once the body is kind of in balance, often the symptoms go away and things can start improving on a symptom basis. But that kind of few years before, few years post menopause can be a really challenging time for many women. And there's about 13 million women in the UK who are going through menopause or are post-menopause, and about 60% of those women are experiencing symptoms. And if anyone is in it right now or has gone through it, you'll know some of these symptoms: mood swings and hot flushes, huge crushing fatigue and brain fog, painful sex, lack of libido, memory loss, really kind of, you know, quite debilitating things that affect our everyday lives. And the trouble with it is that we're often in this kind of midlife phase where life is busy, life is stressful. We are looking after family members, whether it's children, whether it's older relatives, Plus, we're often right in the midst of our careers and working really hard. And we haven't particularly got time to look after ourselves. And often one of the things that goes is our sleep. We know, and we're going to talk about risk factors, but risk factors for menopause, women are at an increased risk of heart disease, osteoporosis, blood sugar dysregulation. And sleep is something that is vital to protect all of those things. So some stats here from a few different kind of combinations, but the main one is from a support group called Sleep Station. And they say that on average, about 12% of women experience sleep disorders in their lives, but this number drastically increases around menopause and perimenopause. So in their 40s and 50s, women, about 40% of women are suddenly having sleep disorders, and that rises once you're post-menopause to about 60%. So that kind of classic thing about, you know, thinking of your grandma waking up bright and early every single morning at the crack of dawn and possibly, you know, going to bed earlier is something that happens because our circadian rhythm, our body clock changes because of the menopause. The average sleep for women is around 6 hours, which is less than it is for men. And there's arguments around all these sleep experts, but most sleep experts agree that we should be having between 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. So you can see just from these stats that many women are in this kind of sleep deprivation. And insomnia becomes a big deal when we're in perimenopause and menopause because of some of the symptoms that menopause gives. So it might be that you're waking up because of hot flushes, night sweats. It might be that you get an increased risk of sleep apnea. Restless leg syndrome can sometimes be something that happens as one of the symptoms for perimenopause, menopause. Anxiety is, you know, all around us, but it becomes quite a big deal when our hormones are fluctuating. Blood sugar dysregulation, life load is a huge factor, and also just that stage of life with our children. Many of us will be in perimenopause or menopause, but still having small children. I have a 5-year-old, and every day at 5 o'clock, he wakes up and crawls into bed with me, straight away disrupts my sleep. But you also might be having older children and teenagers who are suddenly, you know, got their freedom post-COVID, and you're possibly gone to bed and they're still out, and then you wake up at night and 1 o'clock in the morning, where are they? Quickly get your phone out to track them. You know, so there's all of these things going on that might not just be the physical symptoms. And I'd love to know if you're just happy to just put in the chat box if you can relate, because it's quite interesting to find out where your sleep issues might be coming from. So if you've got trouble falling asleep, or maybe you're one of these people that wakes in the night regularly, you might fall asleep easily, but suddenly, you know, 3:22 a.m, you're peeing wide awake with your thoughts racing. Or possibly you're waking up really early in the morning and you just can't get back to sleep. Or conversely, you know, you're just absolutely struggling to get out of bed. So a few people have commented in the chat, so I'll just have a quick look and see what people have said, if I can actually open it. So someone said all of them. Someone said terrible trouble falling asleep and then struggling to wake up. Exactly. All of these seem to get to sleep quickly, but can't stay asleep and waking up several times. Yes, 3:22. It's always 3:17, 3:22. It's just this classic kind of time, which we'll talk about. Someone else, it takes me an hour minimum to get to sleep, and then I wake wide awake in the middle of the night. So yeah, I'm waking at 4 a.m. So, you know, it's common, and we kind of think of it as normal, but it's debilitating, because the next question is, does it matter? When we are thinking about perimenopause, menopause, we're thinking about often short term. These symptoms, they're not pleasant to live with. But actually, we also need to be taking stock of that bigger picture of thinking about supporting our health, because this is a change in our lives. And post-menopause, our hormones are decreasing, the kind of building hormones, estrogen, the protective hormones of progesterone are decreasing. And as we go into later life, we're losing their protective measures. So we've got to start thinking about going into mid and old age as healthy, well women, because that's what we're wanting to be. So does it matter if you're not sleeping very well, or if you're having less sleep on a short-term basis? Well, no, if you are able to still have loads of energy. No, if you are able to, you know, be calm and pleasant and not have, you know, irritability with your partner or your kids or your work colleagues. No, if you're able to still move your body and exercise in the way that you want to. But if your lack of sleep is affecting any of those areas, then it can be something to be, concerned about. We know that sleep is restorative. It heals us. We are more prone to catching colds, catching infections, illnesses if we haven't had enough sleep. And that might be long-term chronic kind of insomnia, or it might just be a few nights of poor sleep. Our immune system is slightly more compromised. When we are thinking about our stress response and our ability to kind of face life's challenges and cope, actually we need that sleep to kind of give our body that time to wind down, to calm, for our brain to kind of process everything. When we're not having enough sleep, or we're waking wide-eyed at 3 a.m. with the thoughts racing, generally we're on this kind of stress spiral, and our body and our brain is not able to kind of calm and rest and restore in the way that we need. When it comes to menopause as well, many women struggle with weight gain and blood sugar dysregulation. And sleep can be something that also has or lack of sleep has a negative impact on this. So when we're thinking about hunger and fullness, we have these hormones that are released. We have a full hormone called leptin. So that makes us, when we eat a meal, it's released, we're full, we stop. We also have a hunger hormone, ghrelin. That's the one that makes us feel hungry, makes us need to eat. Lots of studies have shown that people who have less than 6 hours sleep a night have more of the hunger hormone ghrelin. So the next day they might have not slept well. The next day they have a bigger appetite, and they have more desire to reach for those kind of, comforting, sugary, more processed foods, because they're giving them energy, and this hormone balance is kind of coming into play. So you think, oh, I've just got poor willpower and it's menopause and I can't stop eating and I'm constantly hungry, or, I'm just gaining weight. But it well might be to do with your sleep and these hormones that, out of our control. So, for these reasons, sleep is important. But sleep is also really critical for our brain health. One of the symptoms that I'm feeling at the moment, and many of you might be, is this foggy headedness. I can't get my words out. I do a lot of presenting, and sometimes I'm like struggling with my words and I can't quite get them. You might notice memory loss is a huge one. I've put this picture here of, keys in the fridge, but you go upstairs and you can't think what, you've gone upstairs to get. And it's common when we're busy, and it's common when we're stressed, but sleep can actually, really, I can't get my words out now. Sleep can play a huge impact in that, because sleep is really important for our brain to be able to retain memories and kind of have that new information. And there's an amazing researcher, she's a neuroscientist, called Dr. Lisa Mosconi. And I've put her book on my recommended things at the end, but if you listen to podcasts, I really recommend you listen to her. She's a neuroscientist and studies Alzheimer's in women. And she's shown that when we are sleeping, our brain is kind of doing this cleaning and pruning action that stops the buildup of plaques. And these plaques are what increases our risk of getting Alzheimer's later on in life. And so it's really critical to try and sleep to get these, to reduce the incidence of these plaques. So, I'm not saying these things to worry you. I'm just saying that when we're thinking about long-term health, what we're doing now and how well we can support our sleep is something to really consider. Now, stress is a huge impact on sleep. It has an impact on sleep because often if we're very, very highly stressed, we're unable to sleep. And then when we're unable to sleep, and especially that kind of, insomnia, when you're going to bed and all you're doing is looking at your watch thinking, oh my goodness, 4 hours till I wake up, 3 hours till I wake up. If I fall asleep now, I'll have 2 hours sleep. It's stress. And so that will impact on your sleep. But stress response also has a huge impact on our female hormones. So when our ovaries decline in making estrogen and decline in making progesterone, we still have an ability to make those protective and supportive hormones. The way that we can make them is through our adrenal glands. Now, our adrenal glands are responsible for our stress response. And our stress response is that amazing response we have to get you out of danger. So, it's always a saber-toothed tiger, but you're about to go outside and there's something about to attack you and you've got this sudden power to run away or to fight. This is all controlled by cortisol, by adrenaline, by noradrenaline, and this is vital for our survival. However, when we are in a state where we are constantly stressed, but the stress is not a physical stress. It's a stress because we've got to get to catch the bus at this time, and we've got, you know, you're working in the NHS, you've got this many patients at this time, or this much work to do at this time, or your kids have got to get to school and they've lost their workbooks, and all of these things, and this constant stress. It's not a physical stress, but you're constantly producing this stress response, this cortisol. And what happens is the cortisol is also made from our adrenal glands. It's all made from the same precursor, this master hormone called pregnenolone. Now, if pregnenolone is detecting that there's stress going on, it's always going to prioritize that stress production because that keeps us out of danger. And if it's prioritizing that cortisol stress production, it is going to bypass making progesterone, bypass making estrogen. And that then will have this negative impact on our body because we're not able to generate small amounts of estrogen and small amounts of progesterone, which will help support our sleep. So we need to try and find ways to manage our stress, which we're going to talk about a bit later on. Now, another factor that's probably one of the kind of most, you know, common reasons that women struggle often to sleep or to stay asleep during menopause is night sweats. So about 3/4 of women are experiencing hot flushes and night sweats during menopause, and they are debilitating for many women. Excuse me. And they can go on, you know, all the way into your 60s, 70s even. So we know that the night sweats are caused by a vasomotor issue. It's caused by this fluctuation of estrogen and progesterone. And estrogen and progesterone are supportive for our sleep, but when they kind of have these times when they're dropping down, it affects our core temperature and it makes us have these kind of hot sweats and hot flushes that can be completely debilitating. And it also can make our heart beat really, really fast, and you can wake up, you know, either covered in sweat, very, very hot, or actually just with this pounding heart and no kind of sweats, but it wakes you and it bursts you out of sleep. And again, some new research which has just come out shows that women who experience hot flushes at the kind of stronger, more extreme level are more likely to have cardiovascular disease. So it is a risk factor, and it is something that if you're suffering with, you know, you should go and speak to your GP and try and get some support with it. But when it comes to our sleep, we don't want to be waken up by night sweats because obviously we're trying to do everything we can to support our sleep. So it's just about having some strategies in place. So first one is thinking about the room temperature. Our bodies need to be generally cool to go to bed. Our estrogen is able to drop our body temperature down so that we fall asleep easily. So falling asleep, if you can remember back to the heat wave in the summer, you know, it was impossible to kind of fall asleep. It was so hot. We were all just lying there, everyone sweating and hot and finding it really difficult to fall asleep. So trying to make sure that your bedroom is a cool temperature, or that you've got a fan next to your bed. And again, you can do that with clothing. So it's really, you know, right now when it's suddenly getting really cold and no one wants to switch their heating on or keep it on for long because it's all too expensive, you know, you're doing that sensible thing of putting on more layers, as we're told to do, rather than switch on the heating. So you might go to bed because also, you know, you're feeling cold with lots of layers. But then if you wake up in the night and you've got hot sweats, you know, you're going to have a lot more clothing to remove and a lot more clothing heating you up. So much better to go to bed, you know, in a shorts and a vest and be a little bit cold falling asleep, rather than being hot and warm and then having, you know, more exposure to heat. Again, if you're someone that is waking up in the night and you're having an awful lot of sweat, and, you know, what you don't want to do is try and get yourself too awake, because once you're awake, you know, you're getting the stress response coming in and it's much harder to fall asleep, and maybe your mind starts racing with all of the things that you have to do. So just trying some strategies that, you know, you can kind of manage to make yourself comfortable again, possibly by just having a towel or a spare sheet next to your bed that you can just quickly lie on without having to wake yourself up too much. And I've also put who's in your bed. You know, if you're going to sleep with a partner, you're going to sleep maybe with a child in your bed, if you're going to sleep with pets and a dog, all of these bodies are increasing your heat. So just thinking, you know, who can you get rid of? Can you, you know, pick yourself on, you know, a spare mattress or something on the floor, just, you know, while you're suffering, just to try and make sure that you're maximizing your sleep. I know that's not always that easy, but, you know, people often prefer to get rid of their partners rather than their animals. And then there are some things that can be done to help reduce hot flushes and night sweat. So obviously going and speaking to your GP about HRT. I'm not a doctor. I don't you know, I can't advise around HRT, but, you know, it is absolutely supportive for hot flushes, and it can be a really, really useful thing to try. Stress management can be something that's really useful as well. And CBT can be something, again, that's been shown to be very helpful in minimizing hot flushes and night sweats. Certain triggers can make them worse. So, you know, just being mindful and maybe doing a diary yourself, you know, if you're going to bed with a glass of wine, does that mean that you're more likely to wake up in the middle of the night? Or if you're having something spicy to eat, you know, so just trying to have a bit of a diary to work out your triggers. And then there are some herbal remedies, things like black cohosh, red clover, evening primrose oil. Again, they've been shown in some studies to be quite supportive. So it's something that you might want to speak to, you know, a nutritionist about, or even going into a health food shop and finding out some advice. Again, when it comes to shift work, that is something that does have quite a huge impact on our sleep patterns. And about 14% of the UK population are shift workers. And obviously in the NHS, it's a much higher level. And shift workers are sorry, I clicked something and I muted myself. Hopefully you can hear me. So shift workers are at a high risk of having sleep deprivation than the rest of the population. And what the research shows is that people are 40 plus at this kind of menopausal stage, they find it much harder to cope with shift work and irregular sleeping patterns, and the demand is harder. So in the NHS, there is quite a lot of support. And again, it's not something that, you know, I'm aware of that much, but it's just really trying to find out from, you know, your managers and what support there is out there for you, because it might be that, you know, you can get some kind of regular shift pattern if you're working shifts, or some kind of break in between. We have this circadian rhythm, which you might have heard about. Our body runs on this kind of 24-hour clock and this kind of cycle. And generally, as we'll talk about again in a bit, we you know, are primed to kind of wake up in the morning when we see light and go to sleep when it starts to be dark. And as shift workers, that's often completely disrupted. You might well be working in the night and having to fall asleep in the day. So it does have this impact on your circadian rhythm and your 24-hour clock. Okay, so what can we do? There's lots of things going on. It can all feel a little bit daunting, but there are some things that we can put in to help support our body and help you know, just try and get that sleep and that stress response and those hormones back into balance. So the first thing we're going to talk about is blood sugar regulation. And this is really kind of a way of eating to make sure that our hormones are balanced and to make sure we're not having these spikes from stress. So when we're thinking about blood sugar, we're thinking about, you know, what we're eating and when we're eating. So, you know, in a nutshell, every time we eat food, we break it down, we digest it and we break it down, and the sugar from that food goes into our bloodstream as blood sugar. And our hormone insulin packages up that sugar and moves it into our cells for energy. So that's kind of the basic 101. And our body doesn't like to be too high in things, and it doesn't like to be too low. So it does everything it can to kind of try and regulate and bring us back into balance. So say you've started your morning with a very kind of quick breakfast, maybe it's a piece of toast and jam, there's a croissant on this picture here, and that gives you, you know, a very quick, sharp blood sugar spike, because it hasn't had to take much for your body to break that down. It's been very easy for your body to get the sugar out. So that gives you this quick blood sugar spike. And what can happen then is that you're feeling quite energetic, you're ready to go, but internally, you've got this high blood sugar. So your body is then responding and making lots of insulin to combat the amount of sugar that you've had and that kind of quick release of it. If your body is making insulin, again, that's one of these priority hormones like cortisol. Our body will want to do everything it can to regulate blood sugar, because that is survival. That is what our body needs to make sure there's always enough fuel to kind of support our brain, to support our body. So again, it's going to be putting resources into making the insulin at the expense of supporting our female hormones, our estrogen, our progesterone. So our body has, the insulin has come in and we've had this high blood sugar and we're feeling energetic, but very quickly we start to crash, because our body, hopefully, if we're not diabetic and haven't got blood sugar issues, has been quite effective and removed that sugar. So we get this blood sugar low. And at that blood sugar low time, we're feeling tired, we've got these strong cravings, we might be feeling much more irritable, and we're reaching maybe for a big cup of coffee, for some caffeine for a boost, maybe for something else sugary. What's happening at the same time, if that low blood sugar, is that our body is feeling that as a stress. So it releases the stress hormone, cortisol, at the expense, therefore, of producing estrogen and progesterone, the calming, sleeping, supportive hormones. And we're on this blood sugar spike all day long. And if we're eating this way into the night, so our dinner is maybe quite high in sugar, or we're, having lots of sugary foods before bed, we might often go to sleep with this high blood sugar. We've been tired from our day, we might fall asleep, easily. But a few hours later, possibly our blood sugar can crash and it bolts us awake. So that's something to kind of think about if you're someone that's bolted awake at 3 a.m. Is it my blood sugar that's coming into play? Or it could be that you've eaten something quite sugary close to bed, and that's giving you this blood sugar high, and then you're stimulated and you can't sleep as well. So trying to get your blood sugar in balance for our hormone regulation and for our sleep cycle and our stress response is quite a critical thing to do. So how do we do it? It's a journey and it's a process, but in a few steps, just to make it sound easy, what you're trying to do as much as possible is try and eat in a 12-hour window, so that maybe you're having your breakfast at 7 and finishing your evening meal by 7, and 7 p.m. till 7 a.m, there's no food going in. You're having a fast. I know this is much more challenging for shift workers, but if you're kind of in a daytime cycle, that 12 hours without food can be really, really supportive. It means that when you're sleeping, your body has got much more chance to do the restorative processes. It can do the brain pruning, it can do digestive repair, which was going to support your female hormone detoxification, which is going to support your immune response. If you're eating close to bed, your body is digesting that food whilst you're sleeping, and that can actually have a knock-on negative effect for our digestive health and therefore for our hormonal health. Again, when it comes to blood sugar regulation, it's really critical to try and have gaps between meals, because every time we're eating, even if it's healthy food, we're having an insulin response. So we're trying to minimize this insulin response so that our body doesn't have to keep producing insulin. So really, we're trying to aim for 3 meals a day with 4 to 5 hour gaps between those meals. This, for some people, is easy. Some people, it feels like quite a big change. So, there's no judgment, and I'm not trying to stress you out. And then the food balance of our plate. When it comes to menopause, we're thinking about building our bodies. Food is there as a builder. It's there to support us. And so protein is really key for this, because it helps support our muscles, which will, with the lack of progesterone, will start, to decline, and our bone health again start to decline. And proteins are also the building blocks of our hormones, and our neurotransmitters for our brain. So we need to make sure we've got lots of protein. But protein is more challenging for our body to break down than the kind of simple, fast releasing sugars. So it stabilizes our blood sugar. It keeps us full. We're wanting carbohydrates because they're extremely supportive. They give us fiber, they give us energy, they give us a whole load of nutrients. But the ones that release their sugars more slowly, so we're thinking about beans and pulses, the brown rice and the kind of small potatoes and the root veg are going to be much more supportive than, big white fluffy sweet nice potatoes, chips, crisps, those kind of things, and white bread that just release their sugars very, very quickly and can give us these spikes. And then the essential fats, again, really key. They support our hormones because, again, they're a hormonal structure, but also they help us with this kind of blood sugar regulation. So they help make us feel satisfied, so that we feel really satisfied from our food. We're less likely to crave sugar. They support our brain health, our heart health, our joints. And we're also trying to think about a really nice rainbow of different coloured, brightly coloured vegetables and fruits on our plate, because they all give us a huge amount of fibre. And when it comes to hormone balance, we're trying to get lots and lots of fibre to support our gut microbes. If our gut microbes are supported, we're much more likely to excrete, to poo out old, used up hormones, which we want to get rid of. If they're inside our body and we're quite constipated, we can get quite toxic, and they kind of get reabsorbed into our bloodstream and reused and recycled, and then we get this kind of estrogen dominance, which can then have these negative effects like flooding when we're having periods, bloating, sore boobs, and quite difficulty with mood swings. And you know, a risk of breast cancer and fibroids. So lots of fibre is key. When it comes to alcohol and to caffeine, again, both of these things can affect our sleep, and they're both things that probably a lot of us use on a regular basis to support our emotions, to support our energy. And in small doses, you know, they're fine. I'm a huge fan of coffee. I love my coffee and I, you know, love my drink. But it's being mindful. If we know that we are someone with a sleep problem and or having perimenopause, menopause symptoms, actually, these are both areas that maybe you need to look at. Caffeine has this quite a long time that it stays in our body. So you might have your cup of coffee at 12, at 6 o'clock, there's still caffeine circulating in there. So if you think of it as staying inside your body for 6 hours, you want to kind of work backwards. If you want to be able to fall asleep at 10 at night, you know, you maybe want to have your last cup of coffee no later than 1 or 2 p.m, for example. So just playing around. And I'm a big fan of, you know, we're all different. So some people absolutely can, you know, have coffee or caffeine later in the day and it's fine. Some people can't. But if you're not sure, you know, write down coffee at X time, fell asleep easily, slept all night. Coffee at this time, didn't fall asleep. Just play around with it. And the same thing is alcohol. You know, we often turn to alcohol. It's very, you know, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling tired, life is challenging, and a nice glass of wine is something that, you know, can make us feel better. And we think often that we sleep better, but wine doesn't actually make us sleep, get into that deep restorative sleep. It actually gives us like a sedation. So our body is asleep, but when they look at brain scans and they do these things in sleep labs, they know that actually alcohol-induced sleep isn't particularly supportive at all for our body. So just being mindful. You know, if you're having caffeine, I would always say have it with food, not in replace of food, because also what caffeine does is spikes our cortisol, our stress response, and that then can have this impact on our blood sugar regulation and our hormone balance. And both of them need to be detoxified by our liver, and we're wanting our liver to kind of be, you know, relatively unstressed when it comes to hormone balance, because it has a big role in generating certain hormones and detoxifying them. So we're trying to kind of think about balance and reducing the load on our liver. Okay, so when it comes then to the hormones that we need for our sleep, I suppose there are 3 that are useful to think about: serotonin, melatonin, and estrogen. So you might have heard of serotonin. It's, you know, often thought of as our happy hormone, and it's lots of serotonin is linked with our good mood. It's linked with kind of how social we are, how outgoing we are, but it's also got a huge role to play in our sleep because it makes and helps generate our hormone melatonin. And that melatonin, which we'll talk about in a sec, is the one that kind of helps induce sleep and makes us feel tired. Most of our serotonin is produced in the gut, and we make it from protein. So when we eat protein foods, they are broken down into individual amino acids, and there's a specific amino acid called tryptophan, and tryptophan is what we call a precursor. It makes a building block of serotonin. So we're wanting to make sure that we've got enough of these building blocks of tryptophan to make serotonin. So I always think of like a Christmas dinner when it comes to serotonin, because serotonin rich foods are things like shellfish. So maybe you've started your Christmas dinner with, you know, prawn cocktail, and then, you know, turkey is a huge one for tryptophan. And again, when you're thinking about Christmas dinner, you know, you often have your dinner and you fall asleep. It well could be, you know, starting your morning with, you know, a glass of Prosecco or something, but just thinking about those kinds of foods, sleep inducing, supportive, make you feel happy. Generally, we're wanting to have about, you know, a little bit of protein really with each meal, as much as we can. If you are someone who is vegan, vegetarian, you can still get protein sources from legumes and chickpeas and beans and nuts and seeds. And actually, if you're someone that is a meat eater, those foods are also really, really supportive for our body. And we don't want to be focusing too much on too much animal products, because that can be inflammatory. So it's always this challenge of kind of balancing everything out, but just trying to make sure that you've got adequate levels of protein in your diet to make sure that you're synthesizing serotonin. And then if you have good levels of serotonin, you'll hopefully have good levels of melatonin. So melatonin is this hormone that's released at night, at dusk, upon our body and our brain seeing dark. And the idea is that it makes us start to feel sleepy. It doesn't make us fall asleep, but it prepares our body for thinking, right, night is coming, get that part of that 24-hour circadian rhythm started, so that you start to feel drowsy. Now, melatonin works in balance with cortisol. So cortisol, I've been talking about, it's our stress hormone. It's released when we're under pressure and anxiety and stress. It's released when our blood sugar is low. But it's also released first thing in the morning, so that we bound out of bed and we're happy and we can start our day. I don't think I've ever had a day like that, but you get the picture. Little children often, bound out of bed and are wide awake. So if we are having huge amounts of stress at night, and which we often are, because we've done a full day's work, and then often we've got to come home, and if we've got kids at home, we're doing kid stuff, or maybe there's a partner and life might be fractious, and just life in general, and there's a small window of time to fit everything in. It's busy, it's challenging, it's stressful. So we're often having quite a big cortisol spike at night. That will have this negative impact on our ability to produce melatonin. So we're wanting, as much as possible, to be thinking about calming strategies towards the end of the day, so that we get this melatonin release. And melatonin also declines as estrogen declines, which is something that we can try and support through HRT or through other measures, which we'll talk about in a minute. So melatonin, we talked about having to have serotonin to get it, but there are certain foods which can help increase melatonin production, because we do generate it, and generally it's made in the morning, actually, even though it's released at night. One of the kind of main sources is something called Montmorency cherries, or tart cherries, and you can go on Google and there's lots of companies that sell Montmorency or tart cherry juice or Montmorency capsules, and there's something that you can take at night. You can put them in a yogurt, you can have them in a drink, you can just have a capsule, take at night. And sometimes there are other websites that will show you, if you're this much, you weigh this much, how much juice you should have. It doesn't work for everyone, but it can be quite a supportive, very natural thing to be doing. Flax seeds, again, quite supportive for melatonin production, as are almonds and lots of the berries. And it's about putting these foods in your day throughout the day. It doesn't need to just be at night time having these foods, apart from the tart cherries. We're going to talk about in a second, putting some of these nuts and seeds in to support your female hormone production as well. And then the key thing for melatonin production is making sure that there's a differentiation between morning light and nighttime dark. And that's going to be something we talk about in a minute. So estrogen, I've mentioned a lot. It is the hormone that through perimenopause is on a gradual decline, but we're having these fluctuations because it's in balance with progesterone. Post-menopause, it's declined. Our ovaries are no longer producing it. As we lose our eggs, the estrogen production is less, and so we're only really producing it if we've got very calm, well-working, good-working adrenal glands, and they're not making cortisol all the time. And we'll make it from some of our fat cells, which is another reason why our body likes to kind of cling on to weight during menopause and doesn't want to shift weight, because we can actually make some estrogen from our fat cells. But it has this really protective role as our sleep. So it helps with metabolizing serotonin. And it's, as mentioned before, it keeps our body temperature low at night, which is why when we have these drops, we can often wake up with these night sweats and these kind of palpitations. And it also has a huge role in kind of protecting our mood and, not making us feel sad and anxious. And, those feelings of anxiety are going to decrease our ability to fall asleep or stay asleep. Now, there are some ways that we can increase our estrogen production, which is something that, we can all be doing really easily to support our hormones and our kind of perimenopause, menopause symptoms. So phytoestrogens, phyto means plant, estrogen is estrogen. Certain plants, when we eat them and digest them, they break down into these kind of molecules that have a similar shape to estrogen in our body, and they fit on our estrogen receptors, and they have this mild positive estrogenic effect. And lots of studies to show that women in countries that eat very, very high foods very high in phytoestrogens have much fewer menopause symptoms than women who eat less of these foods, or whole cultures, whole countries that eat less of these foods. And there's lots of studies as well to show that they can reduce, regular intake can reduce hot flushes. So we're thinking about things like soybeans. So it might be that you're having like some edamames as a snack, or you're doing a huge, nice, colourful stir fry and using soy. Flax seeds are absolutely brilliant. So you can buy ground flax seeds from most supermarkets really cheaply. There are posh and expensive ones you can get, but you can just go to Aldi and they do them really cheaply. And then you can put them into anything and everything, about a tablespoon a day. So, if you're having like oats or porridge in the morning, chuck them in. If you're having some soup, chuck it in. If you're baking, chuck them in. They're going to be giving you this phytoestrogenic positive effect all day long. Fruits, pomegranate seeds, you can kind of, be eating, or just berries will be giving you phytoestrogens, and the legume family, so the things like chickpeas and beans and all of those pulses and lentils, so great for giving us phytoestrogens. So you can be having those inside curries, or in a bolognese, or in a vegetable stew, or in soups, all sorts of things. Really easy, really cheap, so supportive for our health. But it's about regularity. So having hot flushes and then thinking, oh, I'll have some flax today, it's not suddenly miraculously gonna switch them off. It is about building them into your diet on a daily basis for a long time. So if you're not yet having hot flushes and you're not yet at that stage, start them now. If you're having hot flushes, start them now and see if a couple of months time if they reduce. When it comes to sleep as well, there are nutrients that are quite supportive. So magnesium is probably a really, really key one. It has been shown, we call it nature's tranquilizer, but it has been shown to be really calming and really supportive on our sleep cycle. And often, lack of magnesium in the diet can interfere with sleep. Restless legs become something that's quite common in menopause. And if anyone's experienced it, I haven't had it now, but I had it in my pregnancies, and it's the most horrible feeling. You're just shaking your leg all the time, and you kind of can't keep still, and it's just really uncomfortable. And that can be a reason that many women can't sleep at night, but it can be to do with low magnesium. So putting some magnesium into your diet in a supplement form through food can be really, a supportive way of supporting that restless leg syndrome. So you'll get magnesium from the kind of vegetable family, whole grains, leafy greens, lots of nuts, lots of seeds. Dark chocolate, good quality dark chocolate, is a great source of magnesium, because I think that's often why we're feeling stressed and anxious and we're craving some chocolate. It's also giving us that calming, relaxing magnesium. Safe to have a supplement of about 350 milligrams a day. You can also do Epsom salt baths or magnesium salt baths. You can just go to like Boots and buy a bag of Epsom salts, or supermarkets sell them, and have a nice relaxing Epsom salt bath, and it kind of, the magnesium goes into our skin and gives us that same effect. Baths can actually be something that's really useful as well in supporting sleep, because we're wanting our core temperature to drop a degree before we go to bed to help with sleep. And if you get into a bath, you're warm and you're hot, you come out, you have a temperature drop, and that can then be a really supportive way of getting that temperature drop before you go to bed. If you're supplementing, look for supplements that say magnesium glycinate, or magnesium threonate, or magnesium citrate. They're all pretty good. Magnesium glycinate is probably the one that I would go to help support sleep, and you would take it at night. Citrate is quite good if you're constipated and need some help with your bowel movements, and you might take it earlier in the day. Magnesium oxide is the one you want to avoid, really, though, because that's often one that we don't absorb very well, and you just kind of be wasting your money. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm a big fan of supporting your blood sugar, and I don't feel that it's that supportive to eat before you go to bed. However, we are all individual, we are all different, and also some of us work on shifts, and so we need to have a snack. But if you're someone that, maybe isn't eating that much at dinner, or you're thinking, and you wake up maybe at 3 a.m, wide awake and hungry, it might be that it's a blood sugar dysregulation, and actually putting in a snack an hour before bed could be quite useful for you. So again, it's about, symptom diary, does this help? And just trialing and erroring it. I don't know if that's a word. So some things that can be supportive. I've mentioned the cherries and the cherry juice. You could put that onto a natural yogurt and have that as a kind of sweet kind of yogurt. Things like bananas, high in potassium, but also very high in magnesium. It can help us sleep. So you could have some nut butter with it as well, which is going to help support that melatonin production. So, some sugar-free almond butter or sugar-free peanut butter. or even a little handful of pistachio nuts. You're not wanting to make this a whole big meal. We're not trying to stimulate too much digestion, but a small little snack an hour before bed, if you're struggling to sleep and you've tried lots of other things, might be supportive. Okay, so those are kind of the food things. And then we're going to talk about some lifestyle interventions. So I kind of love this quote. It's not the presence of stress that's necessarily the problem, but the absence of relaxation. And I think if you can think back to times when maybe you have slept well, it could be, you know, times when you've been on holiday and you haven't had to work, or life has just felt more easy and you haven't had the pressures of stress and just that life load that we're all suffering with. And maybe it's times when you've done more to relax, and kind of trying to think like that and think about when you're getting that relaxation into your day, if you're able. Like, say this knowing that it's not always easy, you know, but those things can be very supportive for your health. So the big kind of buzzword in anyone that's done any research on sleep or insomnia is sleep hygiene. And it's a huge topic. And all my clients that come to me with trouble sleeping will have perfect sleep hygiene because it's often the first thing that we do. But sleep hygiene basically is just kind of a set of routines, rituals, rules maybe that you have around going to bed. And I mean, on this picture here, it's overwhelming how many there are, but I think some of them that can be really useful to just kind of pick out is, sorry, someone's just come in the waiting room. Some of them that can be useful to pick out is just trying to get a bit of a bedtime and wake time routine, because our bodies like to kind of have that predictability. And as I mentioned, the circadian rhythm means our body works on these cycles. So if you try and go to bed at the same time each day, say that's, you know, 10:30 every day, and you try and wake up at the same time, maybe that's 6:30 every day, and just try and be regular with it. And that means even on the weekends, or the days that you're not working. So if you are, you know, someone that thinks, oh, I've got my day off, I'm going to catch up on my sleep, and then you spend, you know, till 12 o'clock in the day, you know, if you're allowed, if you're able, asleep or in bed, that can actually be quite disruptive. It's much better even on those days off to try and get up at the same time, to give your body that consistency and make it kind of understand that this is you. We're going to talk quite a lot in a minute about darkness and light, but the temperature regulation I've kind of mentioned, that's something that's also quite a critical thing, to make sure that your room is cool, to make sure that your room is dark. The other one that is really easy to talk about, really challenging to do, and all of those people that have lay in bed for hours watching the clock, you know, is not to focus on your insomnia. And that's so easy to say, and I'm aware, but if you think about, how do I fall asleep? You actually don't really know how you fall asleep. 1 minute you're awake, the next you're asleep. And when we're thinking about, you know, lying in bed and these insomniac thoughts that are going around in our head, oh my goodness, I've got to get up in 4 hours, I've got to get up in, you know, 3.5 hours. How am I going to fall asleep? Am I going to fall asleep? What's going to happen? You're getting this kind of negative spiral. The cortisol's kind of surging. The melatonin is probably not even been in there. And all you can think about is the negatives. So it's trying as much as possible to think, right, I'm awake, I'm just going to get up, I'm going to utilize that time, I'm going to do the things that are pressing me and worrying me, knock them off, you know, my list, and then I'll go to sleep. And eventually you fall asleep. Or it might be that you put some kind of breathing and meditation, calming, you know, app on your phone or headphones to help you fall asleep. But it's trying as much as possible to not be in bed, lying, tossing and turning, worrying. But I'm really aware that sounds so easy to say, and it's, when you're in it, it's not easy. One thing that can be really, really supportive, and all the studies back it up though, is getting our light kind of situation happening, because our melatonin production, the sleepy one, is controlled by a gland in here, the pineal gland. And there've been lots of studies to show that if we're having daylight first thing in the morning, actually that can be so stimulating to helping with the circadian rhythm, this pineal gland, so that the melatonin gets you know, switched on later on. So you're waking up in the morning, and the first thing that you could be doing, rather than picking up your phone, and I know it's impossible in the dark right now, and you pick up your phone and you get this glare of artificial light, but actually is going and walking to a window and opening, you know, the window and sticking your head out and trying to get daylight straight away kind of on your head. And there have been some really lovely small studies to kind of show the impact of dark and light on sleep cycles. There's one I think she's a journalist called Linda Geddes, and she just did, it's only a study of her, but she decided she was an insomniac, or maybe still is, and she decided that she wanted to experiment what it was like to live without any artificial light for a period of time, and to see if that helped her sleep. So she went to these sleep experts, and they said, yeah, but what we want you to do at the same time is to have as much exposure to daylight in the day. So she would go outside with her morning cup of tea. She would do as much outdoor activities as she could. So rather than going exercising in the gym, she'd exercise outside. She'd go for walks. She'd take all her phone calls outside, do, you know, her typing, she's a journalist, outside as much as possible, even in the winter, even in the cold. And then come dusk, she would not have any lights on in the house. It was only candlelight. And she lived with children and a husband, but it was only candlelight. And what it found when they were doing all her tests was that her melatonin production, so that stimulating sleepy one, was higher levels than it was previously. And it was coming in earlier, about an hour and a half earlier. Her melatonin production was switching on, and she was getting better sleep, and she was sleeping for 2 hours longer. And they've done similar ones where they've taken insomniacs on camping trips, and they've all been unable to sleep previously in their, you know, normal lives with electricity. They go camping, and after 2 weeks, they're all going to bed earlier. They're all having 2 or 3 more hours sleep, and all of them are sleeping through the night. So there is this huge impact that light and dark has on us. And it's trying to manage that as much as possible within the confines of working, you know, in a place where maybe you can't get out to have daylight breaks as much as possible, but trying first thing in the morning, can you get daylight on your face? Can you, you know, get outside for little short couple of minute breaks and just stare? You know, it's not always going to be sun. We're in England in winter, but as much as possible to try and get some of that sunlight on your face. And then trying at night to start getting rid of some of that bright glare and switching off, if you've got dimmer switches on your lights, if you can kind of reduce some of the overhead lights and maybe switch on lamps, trying to make your brain understand that now is nighttime and now is unwind time, so that melatonin production kicks in so that you can start to feel sleepy. And then this blue light, you've probably all heard of blue light as well. It's a spectrum of light. It's not actually blue apparently, but it's a spectrum of light that is the same light that we're seeing from daylight, and our screens and our phones emit it. And again, lots of studies going into this, but generally it seems that blue lights from our phone, even with a night blocking sensor, it doesn't seem to trap that blue light. But apparently computer screens, the night blocking sensor does work. I don't know how accurate that is. But this kind of blue light screen, which we all are looking at, can reduce our body's ability to produce the sleepy hormone, the melatonin. So it is a good idea, this kind of sleep hygiene, you know, part of trying to switch off your mobile, your screens, your devices before bed. Or if that is not possible, you know, putting on these blue light blocking glasses, which you can buy relatively cheaply on places like Amazon, and just wearing those when it's dark outside every time you're looking at a screen. But the other thing is, if that is completely unrealistic, it's just about what are you consuming on your screen, on your phone, on your TV before you go to bed? Because if you're, you know, scrolling through social and feeling like a bit rubbish about your life because everyone else's looks so perfect, or if you're going through work emails and your to-do list and it's overwhelming, or if you're watching, you know, a horror or a thriller or something adrenaline fueled on TV, all of this is spiking your cortisol. You need to be, you know, consuming calming content. Can it be people decorating cakes? I find that really therapeutic. Or those cleaning videos where they're just cleaning stuff, or a gardening program, or something that's just kind of, you know, calming, relaxing, and doesn't, you know, spike any of that stress response. And then thinking about managing stress. As I mentioned, if we've got this high cortisol, we're not going to be producing melatonin, we're not going to be producing estrogen. It's going to affect our sleep. So daily movement, really kind of key to get that cortisol managed as much as we can. It doesn't mean that you always need to be pounding it at the gym. It just means if you know it's a stressful day, our body wants to use up stored cortisol because, you know, it's making us want to run or fight that attacker. So you need to kind of find ways of moving your body, whether it's, you know, if you're sitting at a kind of a desk job, can you be kicking your legs under the table? If you're, you know, in a hospital setting or someone's house setting, can you be moving up and down the stairs or walking the corridors a bit more? Can you be going out for more regular movement breaks and just not thinking it's got to be exercise, it's just moving that body. And of course, as we exert energy and as we move our bodies, we're going to be more tired physically, and that's going to support our sleep. There's lots of apps and YouTube videos to help with things like meditation, with breathing, and they can be something that is so supportive for managing our stress, for helping us fall asleep, but also, managing these menopause symptoms, which can be debilitating, and managing anxiety. And, it's something that I talk about, again, quite flippantly. Just do some meditation. It's not easy. I'm not saying it is, but there are lots of tools out there to support, and it can be something that you can start building into your day. But the other thing is just, is there any time for yourself? Are you waking up at 3 a.m. every single morning? Because actually it's the only time in your whole day that your body has had a chance to think. If you're running and working and busy and busy and busy all day long, and your body is constantly thinking you're fighting this tiger, you fall asleep exhausted, and you've had this chance to relax and sleep for a couple of hours, and bing, you're awake because your body is suddenly like, the tiger, the tiger, the tiger. That's not conducive to a good night's sleep. So is there time in the day that you can take this kind of calming time, some de-stress time, some, little things for you? And again, these things are challenging to put into practice when we're in this stage of life, but it's just working out what the priorities need to be. And actually, if you need to prioritize you for your health, and therefore for your family's health or your work health, that's something that's important. So just very quickly, because I can see there's probably lots of questions and I'm really happy to answer, a few books and resources I want to point you to. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He is one of these amazing sleep scientists. I can't say I've read the book, but I've listened to him on so many podcasts, and he's fascinating, and he talks, all about the importance of sleep and why we sleep. The XX Brain is a phenomenal book by Lisa Mosconi. Again, I've read the book, it's brilliant, but she has on lots of podcasts and explains science so clearly, and what is happening in our bodies as females. And then Dr. Louise Newson's Preparing for the Perimenopause and Menopause book is so informative and insightful and useful in terms of what you can do for support and for HRT and for natural solutions. Really easy read. And again, I'm a huge fan of podcasts. So Happy Hormones and Not Your Mother's Menopause have got lots and lots of information out there. And that one I've put down there, In Our Time, nothing to do with menopause or sleep. But whenever I cannot sleep, I put it on and I'm literally asleep within a few minutes, because it's talking about things that I don't really understand, and history and science and sleepy voices, and it just sends me off to sleep. So I couldn't even tell you half the time what it's about, but sometimes it's useful to have those kind of things, those tools that you just know will send you off to sleep. So we've reached the end. Thank you for listening. I just want to conclude to say that we are, as menopausal and perimenopausal women, going through these huge hormone fluctuations, which do give us these symptoms, and that can have a negative impact on sleep. But we do want to try and prioritize our sleep as much as possible, because we're thinking always about longevity and health, but also happiness, and sleep will have a negative impact on all of those areas. So looking and finding some sleep support solutions for you, and wanting you to be able to kind of pick out things that you think, I can do that, I can do that. I don't want you to think, oh, this is all too overwhelming, it's too much, and make it an added burden. So just something that you can do, and then you build up slowly. So I'm happy to answer some questions. I know I've kind of gone through the hour, but I'm here to answer questions if you've got. So thank you. Shall I take the questions, Mandy, or?
Yeah, if you see them coming into the chat box, yes, it's probably easier.
Let me just open this chat box. It says 68, which is overwhelming.
That's lots of
so
comments.
Let me just see.
Just go to the bottom. They're all lots of comments and chat going on in the box.
Okay, perfect. So lots of these are just thank you. That's great. Let me just see if there's some questions on there.
I've just had a little look through. I couldn't see any specific questions.
Oh, fine. Okay, perfect. Okay, so it mainly seems to be chat actually, which is brilliant. So if anyone's got any questions, I'm really happy to answer. Or you can unmute yourself and ask. So that's also fine. Oh, there's some nice comments. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. There's one here. Okay, no, I think there's none. So that's fine. Lovely. I'll just stay for a few minutes and just see if anyone wants. Someone said that BBC Sounds or Desert Island Discs also helps them fall asleep.
May I ask something?
Of course.
Okay, only because I just don't know if it's a myth or not, but I've been told to try antihistamines, to take a tablet before going to sleep. And I have done that. And sometimes it has made me go to sleep. So then I thought, oh, it might have started my pattern. So then the next night I've not really taken one and I found I have been disturbed. So am I best off still carrying on with the antihistamine tablets?
So it's a good question. I am not a doctor, so therefore
No.
I'm not actually allowed to advise on medication, which is a shame. What I do know is when it comes to antihistamines, you'll see that some of them say non-sedative,
Yeah,
and some of them say
non-drowsy.
non-drowsy, and some of them say have a sedative effect. So I think, you know, you're choosing one that has a sedative effect and it's making you fall asleep. What we're not wanting to do is kind of become dependent.
Reliant on them, yes.
Exactly. So, and if you feel that it's a dependency, then actually it's working out, well, what is it? You know, I mean, are you managing to sleep without them, or are you only managing to sleep with them?
Well, sometimes I find I do keep waking up, but I actually get back to sleep quite quickly. Other times I'll wake up and then some reason I have these maybe some thoughts, and then next thing I'm thinking, oh, why can't I sleep? Why can't I get back to sleep? And then again, like you said, you're thinking, oh, I've got 3 hours and then I've got to get up. And it's just like mindful of like, oh, just switch off. Or I'll wake up thinking about something for work, and I have thought to myself, go write it down to get it out of your brain. And then hopefully it'll make me sleep. Other times I just think I'm keeping my partner up, get up, go downstairs, make a drink, and then hopefully in an hour's time I might maybe feel more relaxed to go back to sleep. So it's been a bit of a mixture.
Guy, and I've forgotten his name, and he says that actually we're also conditioned to be thinking we have to have this strict 8 hours sleep at night, and if we don't, it's all awful. But actually our bodies don't need always to work like that. And actually, if we're having enough of the correct sleep cycles, it's perfectly okay to wake up in the middle of the night, you know, have our sleep cycles are about 90 minutes, and to have 2, you know, or 3 sleep cycles, maybe we wake up for one of those sleep cycles, that we go downstairs and we do our ironing, or we pack and go back to sleep. And there was that whole time, and I think it was in the 19th century, where they used to have this you know, middle of the night kind of thing, where everyone would wake up and then go out and they would have parties, and you know, this whole kind of thing where we had a very different concept to sleep. So I think if you're able to cope with that kind of middle of the night thing and it's not affecting you, then it's totally fine. I think it's more when it's you know, when it affects your body and you can't function, and it's changing the way that you're thinking and feeling and eating and all of those things, that it becomes a problem.
Thank
Someone
you.
said, I know someone who does 2 times 3, 4 hours stints each night of sleep. Yeah, so that can be something that it does work from some people. And someone else has said, if you wake up, don't look at the time. I mean, that is, you know, it's that first thing we often do, isn't it? We reach for our phone, and not only are we seeing the time and we're panicking because we haven't got enough sleep, but that light from our phone is suddenly very bright. So I agree, you know, maybe switching to an old-fashioned analog clock or a watch or something, or do something boring. Yeah, not stimulating.
No.
But sorry, I couldn't really answer the antihistamine question. It might be something worth checking with your GP.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great, people are putting lots of supportive suggestions, but there doesn't seem to be any more questions. So if there aren't any more, or if there are, I'm happy to answer.
There was one more, just quickly, because I'm aware we are over the time. Wondered how long, having made lifestyle changes, I might expect to start feeling the benefit with hot flushes and insomnia.
That's a really good question. It's one of those annoying things, how long is a piece of string? What I find with my clients is they will come to me for whatever reason. I do a lot of female health, so we're maybe thinking about focusing on hot flushes, or we're focusing on digestion. But as we change food, because that's usually the first thing I'm working on, and I'm trying to get this eating structure in place, because that's what I always find the most supportive thing to do quite quickly. And you can kind of understand it if you have your set meal times of, say, 7, 1, 7, for example, if you're eating. Actually, it has quite a quick knock-on effect of sleep and energy. So your sleep suddenly gets better and your energy gets better. When it comes to hot flushes, if you're doing it from a kind of reducing stimulant point of view, that can be quite a quick thing if it's the stimulants that are causing the hot flushes. So say it's caffeine, say it's alcohol, say it's spices. If it's more, actually none of those things are in, that you start including phytoestrogens, the studies have shown that it can take between 3 months of regular daily consumption to a whole year. So it's not a quick fix, but the idea is that you're supporting your body long term, and other things will hopefully start, to becoming better, and you'll start to reducing those symptoms. So it might be that you're still having hot flushes, but perhaps the severity is reduced, or perhaps the time between them isn't as much. So there is hopefully positive impact quite quickly, but it might not be a complete resolution straight away.
Thank you so much. Right, I think we need to let everybody go. I just noticed a couple of people asking about the recording. I believe it's going to be on the website, and that you should be able to get the link there for it. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for everybody attending today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.